So welcome to my super messy workspace. What I wanted to show you is there's a few ways that you can do the center circle. You are going to need the radial stencil in any event for marking. So you can use the radial stencil, which is the size that we need to create the center circle. The center circle is 12 inches. Now, the second thing that you need to decide is whether you want to use a raw edge or whether you want to use a turnover edge. If you want a turnover edge, you're going to need applique paper that is wider than the stencil. You need at least another inch, so you need at least another inch, so half an inch on this side and a half an inch on that side, just to make sure that you've got enough allowance for a seam if you're going to do turnover like I do it on the sewing machine. That's the first thing. So if you're going to do raw edge, this is sufficient, the applique paper is sufficient, but you are going to want to cut it a little bit wider. So you can use this. Your alternative is to use a 12-inch circle ruler, which I do have a half of. The Handy Quilter half circles gives you a 12-inch. So this is my Handy Quilter half circles, and this very big one gives you a 12-inch when stitched. So when you mark with it, you want to use a seam marker so that you can get your 12-inch circle. And then it's all a matter of marking, drawing, and so that you can get your circle. Right, so let's mark. I am doing this on the light table so that I can be sure to align this ruler correctly and get a perfect circle. And then we can do the usual applique thing. Press it to the back of your fabric, cut it out and press, unless you're doing turnover applique. If you're doing turnover applique, use my instructions for that. Right, so I've used a dry iron to press my applique paper to the back of my fabric. I have what I call an applique scissor. It is a fabric scissor, but I do reserve it for applique only because I've got to cut through fabric and paper, and then it's just a matter of carefully cutting it out on the line. And then it's time to pounce. So with your pounce pad, place your stencil on your fabric and then give your stencil a swipe. I always like to give it another tap, just in case, and I can see that it has moved, which is going to cause me problems. Fortunately, it hasn't done a great job marking, so. I just want those lines so that I can mark my extensions off of there. There we go. Because now I'm going to use a nice long ruler and I'm going to mark. If I make sure that I am meeting in the center and I draw my lines through, I can be reasonably assured of accuracy. But by the time that we've done the couching, any oopsies should disappear. I am using my iron off marker, but we are going to be couching over these lines anyway, so you're assured of permanence. If you are using a light fabric, then obviously the blue water-soluble marker will work brilliantly, but I'm using blue fabric, so that's not going to work for me today. And so I've got my, I want to call it a dartboard, marked, and I can start taking out my threads from my basting. If you are wanting to do this before you load your fabric, fine. I just don't trust my placement of a solid piece of fabric straight on my quilt frame, so I like to do my straight lines using my frame, which is why I'm now going to press the circle into the center of this fabric on the frame. Scary stuff, but trust me, it's gonna work. Right, when you're ready to press your fabric to your quilts, I find the middle of my circle by folding it in half and folding it in half again, and then I can align them to the lines that I have on my quilt. Now, if you are doing this on your frame and you are tempted to put your hand underneath to give counter pressure to the iron, please use an oven mitt. You are going to regret not using an oven mitt. So use an oven mitt on your hand if you are planning, or do you think you're tempted to press to give it a bit of counter pressure, then you will definitely need a bit of help. Now, don't try and remove the applique paper from where you folded it unless it's naturally come undone there, which mine has, but I am rather going to take it on another point so that I don't rub or press my folded line out of the way. And then, my friends, it's time to press. Still a dry iron, and I'm just going to let it rest there for a bit and then press out. Rest for a bit, outwards, now remember the marker that I used for this is removable by heat, so chances are very good that I am going to have to redo parts of those. But that is not the end of the world, because I've already got some extended reference lines here. And it is kind of cool to see that disappear. Okay, so when you're comfortable that you've got that in place, you can move on to the next step. If you have lost any of your reference lines for the spokes, then go and add them back in. Yeah, that's it. And then it is time to mark. I haven't got all of this in the camera shot. The shot is a bit wide, so you can grab your wedge ruler and you can start marking. So we are going to use every single spoke that we've marked as our center line from our wedge, and I'm going to draw the complete wedge in, including the end. You are going to have to roll your quilt, which is why I don't suggest you use chalk, because it's going to rub off. Use a marker that is going to stay on here for a reasonable amount of time. You can see where I have experimented. With my placements and the size of the circle and all these things. I am now merely going to reinforce them. You will also notice that I am using the original, the stencil mark. It is about, give or take, 1/4 inch away from the circle, the center circle. There is reasoning behind it. You will see that in a little bit. It's just better to have that space there, unless you are planning on covering the edges of your circle, in which case you can go right up. But I prefer to give it just a little bit of space. Time to attach the center circle. I am using one of my handy quilter circle rulers here so that I can get a 1/4 inch seam, give or take, around the circle. Right, so I have cut my ovals. There's applique paper on the back. You can ignore that. And now I want to find the center of my oval, so I'm just going to fold it in half. And I'm going to align that folded line with the center of my blades. And yes, then I'm going to attach it with an iron on my long arm. Remember, I have said this before, if you do this, make sure you've got your oven mitt. If you are tempted to use your hands to produce counter pressure, so pressure from the bottom. I do not have that issue, so I am just going to do that, although light might be a good idea. So when you place it, remember I have got directional fabric, and I want to make sure that my curves of my Baptist fans are running to the top, and boom. I'm going to do as many as I can without rolling my quilt, and then I'm going to attach them first. I did use an oval ruler, an oval quilting ruler, to create the shape, so I know that I can run across the edge with my machine. Do not do it straight after you have attached it, because you are going to have all that gummy gluiness still, and you want that to settle first before you take your machine's needle through it. So let it settle a bit first. Right, when it comes to starting our couching, the first thing you want to do is extend your blade, the markings for your blade, because now you've already attached your oval applique. So now you need to extend your blade so that you know how far you need to take your couching. Then I'm using tram lines, and tram lines has got a nice 45-degree line that I can use, matching it up with the center line of the blade, and I can just draw that in. Just make sure that it is still aligned. Got my mark there so I can see. And I have to do the same on the other side. Now I don't have to use the inside of tram lines. I can use, I've got to get my head around this. There we go. No, still not. There we go. And make sure that you line to the center, because otherwise you may end up a little bit wanky doodle. I just take my other bigger ruler, which is probably better to use, and I make sure that that line is in the right place. Yep. And that one too. Right. I am going to start in the center, so pull up threads. Okay, and then we can start with our yarn. Let's just find the beginning. Right. And down, and now for the first few I am going to use my ruler just to make sure that I'm starting off straight. Your couching foot is high enough to use with your ruler, and here we go. Right, now a few rules with couching is to make sure that you've got your yarn pooled. As in P-O-O-L, like a swimming pool. You want a nice little puddle of your yarn so that your foot can pull it up easily. And then you can either use your ruler and keep using your ruler to make sure that you are straight, or you can add yourself a few reference lines, marking them all the way down the blade to make sure that you are keeping your angle. You've got all your marks in. You can either continue using your ruler to make sure that you stay straight. I find that when I use my lines, I work out quite well. And we're going to take this nice and slowly to make sure that the thread catches the turns every time we turn. Now, if you find, like I just did, that your yarn didn't catch, make sure that you go over it immediately. It depends on the kind of yarn that you're using, but if you're using something nice and thin like this, go over it immediately, because otherwise it's not going to get stitched down and you're going to have all these loose bits and pieces in your couching. Right, moving on to the tops of my blades. You can see I've already tried this a few times just to make sure, and tried different techniques and different methods, and I'm still settling sort of on my first idea, but I am going to stitch first and then I'm going to figure out the rest. So for starters then, I'm using Frenchie. I have marked on Frenchie the point where I want to start. So where my hopping foot should sit against it with where my needle should start, and I've marked where I want it to end. So I'm just going to stitch that, flip it over and do the same on the other side and continue to do that all the way around. And of course I've marked my center, lining it up with the center from my blade. And then I started catching again, following the oval shape. I did start over the stitching line that I used to attach the fabric when I did the applique. In hindsight, I do think probably this should have been done first so that the feather-like effect from the cotton yarn is covering this bit. But I can go back and just go and add 1 or 2 strides in there. The yarn does allow for that, the cotton yarn that I used first. And then when I got to the top, I did continue with the curve all the way to the top. I brought Frenchie back. I still had the marks on it that I used to create the dome. And then I just created an edge using the yarn going up and down a few times just to finish it off nicely. So I've measured a 12-inch distance from the tip of my blade, and I'm putting my channel lock on, and I'm going to use that to create my border. This will be the first line, and then beyond that I will still add another border where I'll be doing some archwork in. Right, so I have stitched in my border lines, and I've started removing my basting stitches. I am now going to start creating an edge around my blades. To do that, I'm using the same half circle that I used for the center circle, so the 12-inch handy quilter half circle. And I'm aligning my ruler foot with the tip of the blade, and I'm going to work my circle around so that I end up on the tip of the next one. So it's going to be like almost like a spider web going around it. Reason being that the spaces between the blades by now are not 100%, because this is all organic quilting. Yes, we did use a ruler to create the shape, but as we created, as I stitched, I did go wider. You would have seen that. So to bring things back to a little bit of consistency, I'm doing that, and then after that we're going to start filling in the background. Right, I've done all the half circles around the blades, and I have started giving it an echo, but I'll continue with that as I stitch. I'm now doing what I, for reasons unknown, call bubble and squeak. So it's pebbles, and then every so often I throw in a few echoes around that pebble. Sometimes all the way around, otherwise just as far as I can. your point stir lines. That one's a little bit off, so I'll still need to make another adjustment. Okay, so the original plan with arches has been canned because I was of the opinion, let me just move this over, that doing arches along with this little border that I've got happening over here is not going to look that great, so I am just going to do some matchsticks, really simple, really basic, and yeah, just work my way around. I am working on a 1/2 inch space between, more roughly, a little bit more, less than 1/2 inch.